Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. You may have noticed that the pace of videos has slowed down a little bit, and that's going to continue for a little while longer. The reason why is I just got this. These are the crown materials on the Section 74 application. I've got 2 weeks to turn this around into a response, and this is a really big deal. This is going to affect all gun owners in Canada, so I really want to make sure I do my best work, especially because this is going to be an uphill battle. So that's going to have my attention primarily for the next little while. That said, we just got some bad news, and I think it's important at this point to go and look at the Liberal Party platform on guns. A lot of people have asked me to do it. I think this is an important time to do it because it'll remind us a little bit as to what's at stake. So let's have a look at what the Liberal Party is promising that they will do if they're reelected. A reelected Liberal government will toughen our laws on banned assault weapons by making it mandatory for owners to either sell the firearm back to the government for destruction and fair compensation, or have it rendered fully and permanently inoperable at government expense. I don't like this sell the firearm back to the government. Government didn't sell me the gun. You never had my gun, so how would it be selling it back to you? You're talking about seizing it. Selling is a voluntary transaction. But I'm quibbling over words here. Let's look at what this is actually likely to do. First, if you had hopes of grandfathering, they've said that's not going to happen. The next thing is when they say fair compensation. Fair compensation is going to be a big question, and I can pretty much guarantee that the way they determine what they think is fair is going to be very different than what I think is fair. I think it would be fair if I can get the full value back, but I can guarantee you they're not going to give dollar for dollar. They're probably not going to give dime for dollar. Pretty much if this goes through, you should expect that whatever money is sort of sunk into those guns is gone. Don't expect fair compensation to mean fair compensation to anyone except the Liberals trying to find something to balance off the insane amounts of spending that's happening elsewhere. So I have serious skepticism when they say fair compensation. The next thing they say is crack down on high-capacity magazines and require that long gun magazines capable of holding more than 5 rounds be permanently altered so that they can never hold more than 5 rounds. Now, if you know the law here, what you're probably saying is, that's already the law. They already have to be permanently altered so they can never hold more than 5 rounds. However, what this is signaling is that they don't like the current standards. They want to change that to some arbitrary standard, probably some standard of impossibility. Now, it's pretty much impossible to make it impossible to modify a magazine to hold more cartridges. Because if you think about it, somebody with a machine shop and enough time can not just knock out a new magazine from scratch, but they could modify a magazine in whatever fashion. My suspicion is that what they're going to be doing here is setting either new arbitrary guidelines that will require almost all of the magazines on the market, because lots of magazines come from the American market and have had to be modified for the Canadian market. So there's tons of these pinned and otherwise altered magazines out here. They're going to require some new and arbitrary standard, or they're just going to say, listen, if it can possibly be modified, then it's banned. And that may end up having huge impacts on Canadian gun owners. If you have any magazine that has been pinned or otherwise modified so that it can't hold more than 5, for instance, if you own an SKS, this is going to affect you and potentially result in the loss of your property. This next one is really ugly. Ban the sale or transfer of magazines that could hold more than a legal number of bullets, regardless of how they were intended to be used by the manufacturer. So right now, I can get a handgun and it's limited to 10 cartridges. And I don't need to worry about whether there's some other gun out there that this might fit into. I know that this is the handgun, this is the magazine for that handgun, it's limited to 12. This is simple, this is understandable. However, under this new system, if I'm getting a handgun and let's say I'm buying it from somebody or I'm selling it to somebody and I'm planning to sell it with the magazine, now suddenly I need to have an encyclopedic knowledge of every firearm on the market. Because if there's a rifle out there somewhere, no matter how obscure it is, that can take that magazine, well, now this has to be limited to 5. So the legality of this transaction hinges on knowing every single gun on the market. that's ever been made. I don't think I can do that. I mean, I might, I can't call up Gun Jesus from Forgotten Weapons every time I want to engage in a firearm transaction and say, hey, I've got a question. Has there ever been some weird gun that does this? It's just not feasible. This is a completely unworkable and impractical way of dealing with the law. The other thing is that this is going to end up de facto banning or at least making pretty useless several firearms on the market. Let's say you've got a handgun in 40 caliber and so that magazine can hold 10. Except wait, somebody's made a rifle that can feed that magazine. So now it's down to 5. Except that rifle can feed that magazine in 9mm. So now you have to consider down to 5 cartridges of 9mm, which for your 40 caliber handgun will probably mean about 3 cartridges. So you'll have a mag capacity limit of 3. Not a whole lot of people are going to be winning any sort of shooting competition with a 3-round mag. It's just not going to happen. And of course, how are you going to be able to know this? You need an encyclopedic knowledge of every gun on the market. This is a terrible plan. It's a terrible proposal. I mean, it might sound good to the people they're trying to woo with this particular, idea, but it's going to be incredibly damaging. There's going to be a lot of people who are caught up in this who never intended to commit a crime. They just don't happen to be firearm experts and even beyond experts, because even experts could be tripped up by this. There's certainly people who have dedicated their lives to knowing firearms who might still be surprised and say, I didn't know that obscure gun exists. Looks like I made a mistake, and that mistake might have criminal penalties. So I don't like this provision at all, and I think this is a terrible idea. But of course, this is one of the things they want to ram through. And when you think about it, I don't think the Bloc is going to stop them. They'd be happy if they just banned firearms entirely. I don't think the NDP is going to stop them. Same reason. So if the Liberals are in power, expect this to happen. The next thing they say is set aside a minimum of $1 billion to support provinces or territories who implement a ban on handguns across their jurisdiction to keep our cities and communities safe. What this means in practical terms is they want to bribe your hometown. What this means in practical terms is that they want to bribe your hometown to ban handguns. They're going to say, hey, listen, isn't that policing budget real expensive? Wouldn't it be real nice if we chipped in, say, $10 million? All you got to do is ban handguns and that money will flow. So this is very much a proposal to start bribing municipalities to implement this kind of law. They also say we would continue to combat gender-based violence and fight gun smuggling with measures we have introduced, such as... Now, none of these are actually going to do either of those things, but let's have a look at what they say. Lifetime background checks to prevent those with a history of abuse against their spouse or partner from obtaining a firearm license. They already had lifetime background checks. I mean, the case law was very clear that a background check could reach back to the beginning of time. So when they say a lifetime background check, that already existed. If you had domestic violence on your record, they'd see that and they would absolutely consider it. So this is, Red flag laws that would allow immediate removal of firearms if that person is a threat to themselves or others, particularly to their spouse or partner. So this is their proposal to essentially create a swatting provision in the law where somebody can go in and ex parte, so without you being able to present your side of the story, tell some judicial official that you are a danger. And again, you don't get to tell your side of the story. They could be lying. And there have been many, many cases of people who have abused, for instance, emergency protection orders, and later been found that, that what they were doing was abusive, that it was just using the judicial system as a weapon. But these laws that they're proposing would allow for, a tactical team to kick down your door, seize your firearms, ban you from having guns in the meantime. Keep in mind, you won't be able to go to the court initially and say, listen, I'm a police officer or I'm a member of the military. I need to have firearms in order to do my job. And these allegations are completely unfounded. Let's say as well, perhaps you're a carpenter and you're required to use a nail gun. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the Supreme Court, in the case of the Queen and Dunn, indicated that 84 sub 3 firearms, which include nail guns and airsoft guns and various other things, are included in those firearm prohibitions. So if you're a carpenter and somebody who hates you uses this law against you, you might be out of work until that gets sorted out. This is incredibly destructive. We already have a system that allows for immediate removal of firearms, but it's got a different process, and it doesn't immediately impose a firearm prohibition. That's a very important distinction. And the only people that this really hurts are tradesmen, police officers, and the military. When I think of who is a government supposed to go after, I usually think criminals and not maybe, police officers, people serving in uniform. But what do I know? I'm just a lawyer. Next is increase maximum penalties for firearms trafficking and smuggling from 10 to 14 years imprisonment. I can't find too much fault with that. I mean, I don't know what this is going to look like, but okay, sure. The problem is that they catch something like 0.1% of smugglers. So, okay. They say enhancing the capacity of the RCMP and the Canadian Border Services Agency to combat the illegal importation of firearms. Note, they have no specifics here. There's nothing that says what they're going to do. So maybe they're going to dump some funding into it and increase the amount that they catch from 0.1% to 0.2%. But when you look at this, we've already got pipelines for moving contraband into Canada. Drug dealers manage to get their stuff in all the time and in substantial quantities. Firearms are probably easier to smuggle because they are less distinctive. They smell like machine parts to a dog. So when you think about this, if we can't stop people from bringing in fentanyl, how are we going to stop them from bringing in handguns? These are people who are involved in the business of moving and selling contraband. I don't have a whole lot of faith in this, but I like the idea. I mean, the idea here, this is actually something that is on the right track. They're looking at the right people. However, the main thrust of this is aimed at law-abiding gun owners, the people not committing crimes. And virtually every gun owner in Canada is going to be negatively affected by this. This is a really serious bill. So I know we got some bad news recently. I'm not happy about it, and I know a lot of people aren't either. However, it remains critically important that there not be a re-elected Liberal government, because this is their plans. The other thing is that it's not just firearms that are at stake here. They also have real big plans for what they want to do with the internet. And that's really where they want their majority. Because if they get the majority, they can push that through despite the virtual certain opposition from people who say, wait a minute, that's going too far. That is too much censorship. The censorship plans they have on the go are such that nobody, regardless of your place on the political spectrum, should want to give this much power to a government. If you like Trudeau and if you like the Liberals and you think that they walk on air, they can do no wrong, you still should not want this architecture of censorship set up. Because once it's there, it is virtually guaranteed that it will eventually be used by somebody you dislike, somebody you despise, somebody you outright hate. A politician you just cannot abide will one day be in control of whatever powers are implemented today. So it is very, very important that these powers not be given to a government because they will inevitably be misused. It is a virtual certainty that a power given to government is eventually misused in some capacity, and these censorship proposals that they have on the go are just ripe for it. Anyway, I felt it was important to get this video out, notwithstanding the fact that I have a ton of work I got to get done, because this is kind of a pivotal moment. If some of these plans are implemented, I think Canadians are going to come to regret them, and it'll be very difficult to turn back that clock. Once government gets power, they're very reluctant to give it back. So anyway, this is an important election. Make sure you treat it that way. I want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Jonathan Wheeler, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Farms Association, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, Ivo Nedev, and the CCFR. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Raymond L. McKinnon, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Jane Babe and Luxor, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Bruno R., and Andrew Elsich. Thank you as well to all of my supporters at the $10 level who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge.